Let's say it's late night on any given day and you're surfing through the TV channels. You've got a star-studded lineup: the Jimmys, the British, the other British, the President from Monsters vs. Aliens, some crazy ass shit going down on Cartoon Network, a beheading on the History Channel. However, through all this mess, there's one that seems irredeemable. A program so mid that people are saying being fired from it was the best thing that ever happened to their career. I'm of course talking about Saturday Night Live. Welcome to my channel, and today we're talking about the fall from grace that Saturday Night Live had and how its executive decision making ultimately destroyed the show. Believe it or not, Saturday Night Live once upon a time was digestible and somewhat original. The van down by the river skit, a classic might I add, sees Chris Farley go through a table. The other cast members didn't know this was going to happen, so their reaction was actually pretty genuine. On top of that, this skit alone is way more funny and quotable than any other skit they've pushed in the last 10 years. You could argue it's a casting issue, but I really don't think it's that, although there have been legends on the show, you know, Bill Murray, Will Ferrell, Chris Farley, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Hader, Tina Fey. I mean, the list goes on and on. However, I don't even think it's the cast's fault. I think it's everything besides the cast. Mainly just writing and decision making. Let's take Pete Davidson, for example. I'm not much of a stand-up guy, but I've seen some of his content. It's pretty good, you know, it's definitely like pretty original, authentic, funny. But now let's transfer that to SNL, where he has this Chad character where he quite literally just says okay to everything. There's seriously 30 minutes worth of content of this character on SNL's YouTube channel.
I wrote this for you last night.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations, you just used your first Cartesian logic.
Okay.
You know, I get it for maybe one bit, like, oh, that's funny, like, he doesn't care, but it's just a very stale and repetitive format. Now, to rebuttal this, you can maybe ask yourself, is today's audience just really brain dead and lacking good taste? Yeah, honestly, you're probably right. Obviously, the majority of people still don't find this kind of stuff funny, but I think they just know their cult core audience will enjoy it. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is people like Pete Davidson are getting their talent thrown down the drain just because of awful source material. Speaking of wasted talent, my next point is the firing and parting of ways of two very talented individuals. The first is Tim Robinson's separation from SNL in 2014. He would go on to co-create Detroiters, but then where I know him from is the Netflix sketch comedy show I Think You Should Leave, which I think that show was hilarious, and a lot of those skits were rejected SNL skits, so it's kind of ironic. Like, they're like, oh, this is too funny for our network, we can't have this on here. I think they found some of Tim's work too edgy, even though it's really not, especially when you look at SNL's past work, which we'll get into more later. It's just the case of SNL doing what's best for PR, even though obviously it's not. Now to the second employee, this was an actual firing. You've probably heard of this, but the comedian Shane Gillis got hired to be a cast member, but ended up getting fired just like a day later. After his hiring, articles came out scrubbing through his podcast, seeing him say an Asian slur. I'm not saying it's okay to use these words, but the use of the slur was honestly so innocent and casual, like not really like a fireable offense in my opinion. And you can watch him explain the whole situation on Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm not high-fiving Shane Gillis for saying this, but this is very hypocritical for SNL to do. The reason I say that is because in 1975, they had a skit called Word Association with Chevy Chase and Richard Pryor, where they essentially exchanged racial slurs for a minute straight. Or how about when Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon did blackface? Or the skit that actually got scrubbed off of the internet. It's titled Ching Chang in Love, which stars Dana Carvey, a white man pretending to be an Asian person talking like an Asian accent, you know, very stereotypical. Even this article says, considering SNL sacked Shane Gillis after discovering him making similarly racist remarks on a podcast, they should perhaps check their own history too. The sketch is so dated that we struggle to even find a clip for it. The point I'm trying to make here that one word association is, that one's like really bad, like there's hard R's in that. But you think if they really felt this way about Shane, they would have at least removed that skit or issued like a public statement like saying, hey, times are different back then and this doesn't really line up with our culture. I find it really hypocritical that they would fire Shane Gillis over this to look holier than thou, even though they have a history of using slurs in their skits. And the reason this is significant is, one, I think it's a terrible PR move by SNL, and two, Shane Gillis would go on to co-create Gilly and Keeves, which is a really funny sketch show on YouTube if you want to go check that out as well. Just another missed opportunity for SNL. And now my final point, and that is blatant plagiarism. With these kind of shows, there's probably a lot more plagiarism than we think. I found one really bad case, and there's chances are you've probably seen it as well. Those of you who don't know Joel Haver, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He's a sketch comedy YouTube artist who also does beautiful animations that are hilarious. Anyways, he released this bit where he was spoofing the Charmin bear family and how the son doesn't want to become a Charmin bear when he grows up. Like, doesn't want anything to do with toilet paper or whatever. It's pretty funny. However, not even 2 months later, SNL released essentially the same exact skit. Although it's not a cartoon, it's live action, it's a little bit longer, but the same exact idea is there. Anyways, Joel released a video explaining the parallels here, and he even gave him the kind of the benefit of the doubt at first. He was like, you know, I think a lot of there's parallel thinking is a real thing, and like, you know, maybe it's just coincidence. He talks about no matter how original you think your idea is, someone's probably thought of it before. He even talks about how he somewhat ripped off someone without knowing it, so obviously he's not going to point fingers at anyone right away. But then he details how these two bits are way too similar to be coincidence. Joel didn't get up in arms about it. He was just like, hey, by the way, like, this happened, like, it's kind of funny, like, look how pathetic, like, big TV's gotten. But this feeds into SNL's culture when it comes to plagiarism, which goes far beyond this. In that same Joe Rogan Rogan clip with Shane Gillis, he details how if he didn't get hired during that audition, that any material that he presented to them was no longer his and that they could use it for their show. So stealing people's content is nothing new for SNL, but seeing them come for someone like Joel is just so pathetic. That about wraps up my SNL rant. To say the whole entire show and everything that it does is terrible is an overstatement. You know, they do a good job with having relevant guest hosts and like live performances are good. I mean, you know, you can't really mess that up. I'm trying to post more on this channel. I know it's been a while since I've been on here, so if you like this video, go check out my other videos. You can also check out my gaming channel that I started a couple months ago. And if you didn't like, you can dislike, comment if you like, and as always, thank you for watching.
I'm gonna let it rip.